here today. So, like Tamsin was saying, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to cope with anxiety and depression after acquired brain injury. And I wanted to sort of take a slightly different stance on this. I hope that's okay and talk to you about that. So, part of what I'd like to do is set the tone for this webinar and thinking about anxiety and depression. And part of that is thinking really about the lived experience of people who live with anxiety and depression, have experienced those symptoms after an acquired brain injury. And full disclosure, I'm not someone who has experienced or had an acquired brain injury, but I have worked with lots of people who have, and have also talked to them about this presentation and content to make sure that I've tried my best to try and capture their lived experience. And I want us to think today about acquired brain injury as an unwelcome visitor, and that's going to be the theme of my entire session. And it's an unwelcome visitor in the most precious of places. Our lives, our homes, are things that matter to us most. To do this, the session's going to focus entirely on one sort of analogy or metaphor. And I'm a huge fan of analogy and metaphor, and I use it therapeutically all the time, but also I enjoy it just individually in terms of explaining complicated concepts or trying to understand somebody's experience. It's a way of sharing, I guess. And why I like it is it's a very powerful way of expressing experiences in a symbolic way that is often difficult to put into words. And I often hear that in my work in acquired brain injury, that it's difficult to put into words how I feel. It can help people come together to tell an important story or to think of ways of constructing new stories, so a way of sharing an experience. And it also can help us investigate experiences in new ways, in different ways. And finally, hopefully it's new, different, and engaging. It's something that you might not have had before. So this is the task. This is a task I'd like you to start this webinar with. And it can be really difficult to do this. So what I'd say is if it's uncomfortable, if it's particularly sensitive at the moment, please feel free to not do this or move on or just listen. Or in sort of the most extreme case, please log off if it feels hard. And what I want you to do is I want you to bring to mind your home, your space, the place where you live, reside, the place where you feel comfortable on an evening watching television. Really imagine it. And the difficult task I'm going to ask you to do is I want you to imagine your home has had an unwelcome visitor, someone who has come in and stolen or touched your belongings in that space. And again, just take a moment to really kind of imagine what that initial sense might feel like. And try and connect with what turns up, what sort of thoughts or feelings or emotions turn up, about what sort of things pop into your mind and how you might feel. And when we think about that idea, the idea of someone coming into our homes, intruding, that sense of finding our belongings overturned, smashed, damaged, gone, feelings of pain, uncertainty, and sadness are all very normal in that situation. Certainly, I imagine, if my home had been sort of ransacked, I might feel a sense of distress, sadness, worry. There might also be feelings of shock, horror, and fear. Again, those are all very, very normal. Is my home secure now? Might the person come back? Where are they now? Where are my belongings? But there's also things like uncertainty, doubt, and questions about the future. Again, those are very normal in the immediate aftermath. But how do I manage? What do I do? What do I need to do? Contacting insurance companies, contacting friends. These are all very typical and normal reactions. And if someone or you had previously lived with depression or anxiety, at the time of that happening, it's very likely it could make it harder for you to cope, or those symptoms get worse as you immediately discover the aftermath of someone being in your home. There might be some typical thoughts as you discover your home, having been sort of having there been an intruder in your home. So things like, I can't believe this has happened to me. I don't need help. I can get on with it myself, as people sort of rally round to help you pick up the pieces. You might say things like, I'm fine. You might diminish the fact that this has been a big event and say everything's okay. You might also things like, it's all going to be okay. This is nothing to worry about. This isn't a big thing. And similarly, it's nothing. This is nothing. I can move on from this. And I guess another common theme that people might hear is this could have been so much worse. particularly as we kind of look through the belongings that are left and we find the ones that we maybe particularly hidden away or were a bit more secure, we go, thankfully they didn't go. So what first then? So if you imagine again the idea of someone breaking into your home, your safe space, what do we do first? And thinking about what help might we need in the immediate aftermath. So in a way, thinking about those normal, typical emotions and reactions of fear, sadness, pain, thinking about, well, what support might we need just in the immediate aftermath? And I think that's an important question to ask rather than telling you what that might be. Because ultimately, that's very different for everybody and who you might call upon, what resources you might need, what you might need to do, and also how we cope with it. And again, in my experience of working with people who have lived experience of acquired brain injury, it's often that I'm curious about what happened in the immediate aftermath and their recovery. And importantly, then, who might help us? Is that someone we're really close to? Is it a family friend? Is it a professional? Again, this is slightly different for everybody, but there may be some common themes. I suppose the next stage then is thinking about what happens as the dust settles. So once the immediate aftermath is, of the intrusion has happened, what do we then do as we begin to kind of secure our homes, think about tidying and getting things back? And if you imagine it's been some weeks, months, or even years now, the unwelcome visitor, for a variety of reasons, still feels really fresh in your mind, in your life. You just can't seem to shake the fact that this has happened. What sort of things might you be thinking or feeling in this stage? What kind of emotions turn up? Or what kind of worries or concerns turn up as well? There can be some typical thoughts in this sort of period. Why does this still feel so hard? It's been weeks, months, and years now. Why am I still struggling? People keep telling me I need more support, and I'm not sure if I do. I think I'm doing okay, but I'm obviously not. People might also think I have all my stuff back now. I think it's all there. Why don't I feel the same? Why doesn't it feel the same as it did before? Why doesn't my house feel the same? And there might also be thoughts like, I wish I could move out. I just wish I could just move away from this place and almost pretend it didn't happen or just get away from it. And again, commonly, I wish other people understood how this feels. So although other people might have had a break-in or an intruder or something happen, to really sit and experience what this current feeling feels like is really, really hard for other people. But it also really hurts. It's really painful when people tell me that it's fine and I need to move on. It also hurts when people say that I shouldn't be feeling like this because my house looks back to normal. They visited, they can see all the belongings, say, yeah, well, it's fine now, isn't it? Everything's here, everything's back as it was. We can just move on. But also people keep banging on to me about new security systems or what I should or shouldn't be doing. In their experience, they would do this. You should really do this. What have you thought about this? That can feel really painful and stressful as well. And also people might say, or they might want to move on, but everyone seems to have an opinion about what I should be doing, whereas I just want to move on from this. And it's also really difficult when they compare your intruder to their friend's, auntie, sister's, brother's intruder. So again, we all might have some distant connection with being broken into or having had an intruder in our home. And it can be unhelpful to hear about X person's experience and what they did to get over it, to move on. And part of what makes it so difficult is the personal meaning we attach to the things in our home. So all of us might have homes, all of us might have belongings, but it's about our attachment to the meaning of those belongings that makes a home a home. So the items we hold dear might be lost, damaged, or they're still there, but they feel different. So the picture frame with the photograph in it that was overturned or smashed, that you have, and that's again because we assign different meaning to different items. A cushion, for example, can be relatively not meaningful, or it could be very meaningful. The idea is it's a cushion and it's replaceable in a physical sense, but it feels different when the replacement is made. But it also can affect our previous view of the world, and it also influences our current view of the world. So, what does it mean now that someone's been in my safe environment, the place where I feel safe, so this thing has happened? And how do I make sense of my understanding of what the world used to be like, but also what the world feels like now? And I guess that brings us on to kind of what is depression, what is anxiety, and what's it all about? And if we think about depression initially, this is the idea of a significant loss. And loss is the key word here. Loss is about changes, things that aren't there anymore have changed. It's the loss of meaning. And that is very different for everybody. So, whilst there are some common themes in loss, the loss of property, the loss of items, the loss of personal belongings, the loss of expensive items, they might be similar themes when someone's had an intruder or being broken into. It's about the meaning behind those items and the meaning of loss for people who live after something like this. And from an anxiety point of view, what's that about? Really, it's about uncertainty, or how I kind of like to think about anxiety, what if questions or future based questions. So, what if this happens again? What if I can't replace my items? What if the insurance doesn't pay out? It's the idea of these repeated what if questions and uncertainty about the future, about the ability to cope and manage. And again, I really want to emphasize those 2 points. So when we think about coping with anxiety and depression after acquired brain injury, from a depression point of view, it's thinking about loss and what loss means. And in anxiety, it's thinking about uncertainty and uncertainty for the future commonly. For many people as well, and I thought this was a really, really important point, their homes might have always felt uncomfortable, or they might have always felt unsafe or estranged from a place that was meant to be their safe place prior to the intrusion. So, for a variety of reasons, home for some people just isn't a safe place. And again, if we think about the idea of an intruder coming into that space, it can make our experience even harder, particularly when we've lost belongings. And again, understanding what home or us means is important in understanding responses to intruders, loss, or concerns about the present or future. So often thinking about how do we cope with anxiety and depression is thinking about, well, what does safety mean before this happened? What does safety mean now? So moving this analogy on a little bit further, I want you now to imagine that it's been some time after the intruder, after the break-in, after someone's been in your home. It's been some weeks, again, months or years. And the unwelcome visitor still feels really fresh in your mind and in your life. You just can't shake it. And again, a question for you all is thinking about what sort of things might you be thinking or feeling in that stage? Again, particularly when we think about months or years after the event. There might be some really particularly painful thoughts during this period. So people might say things like, I can't cope feeling like this anymore. People might say, what's the point? People help, but I don't seem to feel better after they've helped. And again, repeated what if, what if, what if questions. It feels like my mind is full of what if questions. I can't seem to move on from it. I suppose more challenging is where people say, I don't like the person I am now. I wish I was like that old person before the intruder. That could be that I was carefree, or I was doing more, or I felt safer. But also people might say things like the world is shit, I'm shit, and the idea of will it ever get better? And again, it can be really hard to live the life you would want or think we should be living when these thoughts and feelings relent. So the idea of the constant what if questions, the constant sense of feeling unsafe, in danger, or not oneself. And for some, changes to their living circumstances, in whatever form, offers more opportunities for these thoughts and feelings to hang around and cause hurt. So commonly for people, they might find that they do less as a result of the intruder. They go out less, they see friends less, they feel a bit more isolated, and they're much more then alone with the difficult and painful thoughts and feelings. So bringing it back to what we're talking about and thinking about common reactions in the case of depression, it's very common for people to feel a real deep sadness. And this is a perpetuating feeling of sadness and loss. Questions like, will things ever be the same? Can they ever be the same? And will it always feel different? The idea I cannot cope with the losses that I've experienced. For others, it gives them a different view of the world. So, a view that the world is dangerous and that my life isn't the same as it was before. And there might be a tendency to see everything as bad. I just notice the very bad things that happen in life. So I turn on the news and I'm just overwhelmed with all the bad things that happen, or I'm aware of my friends and everything bad that's happened in their life. But also for people, there can be a loss of hope. So the idea, I cannot imagine how things could be different for me in the future. Um, but also a huge change in how you live your life. So changes to hobbies, sleep, and diet. And again, these are all potential indicators of the presence of depression, the presence of this kind of unrelenting feeling over time. And thinking a little bit about anxiety, it might be that there's deep concern. So, again, deep concern about what if this happens again, or what if they come back in the case of this analogy. And what if I can't manage? What if I can't get through this? And again, very commonly with that analogy of what if I don't find my things again? There can be a real deep sense of unease. So, thinking that the world is dangerous or more dangerous than it was before, and the idea that I am unsafe, I feel unsafe. And for a lot of people, the idea that our body feels a bit more on guard. So, my body is reacting to fear. So, feeling more sort of tense, on edge, fidgety, and a bit restless, and that persisting. But also, I think, particularly for people who might experience change after an intrusion, that constant question of, is this just normal body stuff, or is there something more? Is there something different happening here? So I almost don't understand what my body's doing now. I can't understand the signs that it's telling me. And that leads to the question of, do we need specialist help at this point then? And what does specialist help look like? So again, if we go back to the intruder idea, how do we know when it's time to call in the sort of experts to help me with how I'm feeling? And really, it's about thinking, it's about the passing of time and this idea that we still don't feel right. And it's hard to imagine how our homes will ever feel the same again. How will we ever get it back to how it was? It might be that you've started to neglect your home, thinking, not tidying up, not cleaning, not doing the things you would normally do. So, again, asking the question, what's the point when the world is so unsafe? And again, thinking, what if it happens again? I can't settle thinking about this. It's affecting my sleep. I'm avoiding people. I'm repeatedly locking the door. I just can't settle because of how I feel. Again, that idea of my things are here. I've got all my stuff. I've got to replace things, but it just feels different. I just can't settle in my home. And as I've previously talked about in the context of depression, not being able to cope with the loss anymore. I just can't move on from the loss and what I've experienced. I think an important sign, particularly when we've gone through a loss or when we're experiencing uncertainty, is looking around at the people we trust and noticing, are they showing more concern about my experience now? Really listening to them, because you trust those people. Those people know your sort of common reactions to stressful situations. And with the idea of an intruder or an intrusion or a break-in in your home, what are they noticing? Maybe I need to ask them. Maybe I need to think, how do you think I'm getting on? Are you worried about me? Or maybe they're just expressing that worry. Maybe that's a sign where getting some specialist help might be a good idea. But what does specialist help look like? And there are some common things, but again, as I mentioned, it can be different for everybody. I think it's unfair to say that there's a right thing for every person, particularly after an intruder. So, employing a security specialist might help. For some people, that might be really, really helpful. Talking to someone about what happened and getting their expert advice might also help. And for some people, medication might be helpful to feel safe enough, or to just generally reduce sort of the pain they're feeling or the sort of restless symptoms they have. And it might also help them then do the first two of those. So, in order for me to see a security specialist, in order for me to talk to somebody, I might need medication to help me access those things. But it may also be important to stay socially connected and to maintain our roles and relationships. We may need specialist help to help us repair our homes, for example. But also there might be some self-help based materials and advice from others with lived experience. So I guess in this example about watching YouTube videos or accessing websites or looking for government information about how we might cope with an intruder or a break-in and what feelings are common. And in a way, that's part of why I've introduced this analogy, because in a way, trying to look for a way of communicating a shared experience and how we might talk to others about how it feels is a big part of this as well. So moving on to sort of the kind of final stage in the analogy is thinking about what does rebuilding and living look like after we've had an intruder in our home. Adjustment to something like this really does look different for everyone. And there are some common things that can be helpful, but there is personal meaning and loss and uncertainty, as I've already discussed. So again, thinking about the picture frame, the cushion, it isn't just about those items, it's about what those items meant to us. And we might feel like we have moved on, but small reminders of the loss can bring back old emotions. So again, going back to the analogy, we might find a symbol some years on after the break-in or intrusion. And in this example, it could be a shard of glass, as you might see in the bottom right-hand corner there. And once we experience that, it might bring back all of those emotions again, the sort of fear, sadness, pain, concern. It might feel very familiar, even though it's years and years and years on. So in summary, and covering some of the main themes that I've discussed, feelings of fear and sadness in the immediate aftermath are completely normal when we experience intrusion or someone comes into our home. People can cope and manage and find a way of moving on with support from people close to them, but it can be really hard. And some people at different times feel overwhelmed by their sadness and worry and may need additional specialist help. Feelings can re-emerge and adjustment takes time, particularly when coping with anxiety and depression. And again, just really bringing it all together. If we think about what the sort of break-in or intrusion represents, this is people's experience of injury loss in the context of an acquired brain injury, about their story and their experience of loss and brain injury. When we think about picking up the pieces and replacing items in our home, really this represents early recovery and that word survival. So I've survived my injury and I'm beginning to think about what the future looks like and what help I might need to rebuild. The redecorating, rebuilding, fixing, and doing that with help could be rehabilitation and support in whatever form that takes. For some people, they might need more rehabilitation or more support, or they might need less. And also, people might experience that some days they want to move out of their home, and some days they love every detail of their space, and that changes on an almost daily or weekly basis. And we talk about this in thinking about adjustment over time to brain injury, about what my life feels like and looks like now after I've experienced an injury. But also things like it's different now, but it's home. This idea of that I've adjusted or I'm continuing to adjust, that I've learned to love my space, even though it's different and feels different. And that process continues to evolve and change over time, and again is different for everybody. And it's a constant sort of process of learning, adjusting, often with support, but often with people who are closest to us and who can help us with that period of adjustment. Thinking about getting some very practical support if you're experiencing symptoms of depression or anxiety. So for people affected by brain injury and their carers, the Headway website is obviously a fantastic resource, and there's lots of self-help materials there, as well as some practical guidance about where you could go for some additional support. It might be also important to speak to your GP, neurologist, a neuropsychologist or psychologist you're working with, or an occupational therapist, or another health professional you might be getting support from, or also a mental wellbeing service, or in particularly difficult situations, Samaritans or another talking type service. For carers, family, or people who want to know how to help someone they care about, it might be important to go on websites like carers.org or carersuk.org. And I've put family there in inverted commas because family doesn't have to mean sort of genetic family or the nuclear family. Family can mean lots of different things, whether it's a friend you've known for a very, very long time, a colleague, someone who you class as important to you. So that's everything I wanted to cover today. I hope that all made sense. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to say if you have any questions, I'll happily answer them. but also just a special thank you to the adults and families who provided feedback on this presentation in advance of doing it. They really felt that this analogy captured some of their lived experience, and I wanted to share that with you all. But also massive thanks to Headway and the professionals involved in producing specialist guidance and advice for people affected by acquired brain injury. And last but not least, Dr. Gabby Parker, who supported with the development of this analogy and metaphor and listened to me come up with ideas. So thank you very much to her. So I'd